Have you ever wondered how your sales performance compares against your competitors and peers? The B2B Sales Benchmark Report provides the definitive guide to what success looks like in 2021. See how you compare in terms of win rate, sales cycle, average deal value, relationships, and engagement. You can see the results and get the full report at ebster.com/B2B-sales-benchmarks. This is Sales Ops Demystified, the #1 most downloaded podcast in sales operations. We invite the brightest minds in sales operations onto the show to deconstruct the why, what, and how behind rep productivity, forecasting, metrics, and all things revenue. This podcast is brought to you by Ebster, the leading customer engagement platform for Salesforce. Hello and welcome to another very special episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. We're joined by Robert Smith, who is the Director of Sales Operations at Botify. Now, Robert initially started off life as a BDR and then shifted into sales operations and now has been running sales operations for a number of startups until this position now. Robert, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Were they accurate with the BDR description there?
Yeah, that was part of my journey. So originally I started as kind of a junior sales rep at a financial research firm. And I was there for about 3 years. I moved into an account management role for a little while. And that's kind of where I got my first taste of what sales operations or an operation-based role could do. I can dive into that a little bit if you...
Well, yeah. First question is how did you get into sales ops?
Yeah. So in this this financial research firm, as I transitioned into an account management role, I worked with our VP of operations, who's actually still at the company. So this was a couple of years back for me, and he's continued to do great things there. Basically, we were rolling out a new product, and in the CRM that we used, we basically had to kind of go into the back end, design some new fields, collect a lot of data from our clients. And then that was really the way we implemented it. It was an alert-based system. So we were gathering information from our clients, and then I was kind of actioning, alerting based on what they had given us. And that was really the first time I had seen kind of what the power of a system could do, in that you could take customer insights and kind of translate it into a new product that would make your customer base more happy.
Got it.
And then from there, I actually went to a London-based company. I was working out of New York, but an HR tech company called Reward Gateway. And that's where I was kind of in a BDR position. So it was a very specialized BDR position, I would say, in that not responsible to come up with 50 or 100 new leads a day. It was more so like 5 to 10 would be a lot. And it was very, very specialized. And really the point of it was to dig into what our ideal customer looked like. So it was really a journey in collecting data on ICP, or ideal customer profile. And actually at Reward Gateway, that BDR position is really what kind of cemented my transition into operations. So in the New York office and in the US based operation, there was nobody. It really started with Salesforce. There was nobody managing the US Salesforce instance. So I had a lot of freedom to play around with that in the day to day. So I was able to kind of build some fields to collect new pieces of data, and then get some reporting together. And I worked with the two heads of our office, our VP of sales, and then the head of the US in terms of kind of what that reporting could show us. At the time, the Europe-based piece or part of the company was very well established and doing very well. The U.S. kind of had the freedom to be a little bit of experimental. The product was positioned to HR, so obviously HR in Europe operates very differently than HR in the U.S. For a number of reasons. So again, we had freedom to play around with what data we were collecting, and then really defining what market we were going to sell into. So I was able to kind of hand off some of those BDR responsibilities. I actually kind of built a playbook for it, brought somebody on in the US, trained our London team and our team in Australia, and then got to move kind of more into that, what would be operations. So a lot of reporting, dashboarding, brought on a few tools to help collect client data. Yeah.
So just so I understand, the Reward Gateway BDR position wasn't like a traditional hardcore BDR position. It was almost more strategic because you're trying to work out who to target.
Yeah, it was. So it was a really cool opportunity. So they were at the time kind of, again, the US was experimental. So they were working on the idea of kind of a sales pod where there would be a really specialized BDR, kind of an intro salesperson, and then like a closing salesperson. They found success with that pod model, so that's why I had the opportunity to roll it out to my colleagues in London and Australia, and then again I brought somebody on in the US, and then moved over to the operational piece.
Got it. But what was it? I totally understand. Like the role was kind of more like strategic and operational. And was it that you enjoyed that part of work, that part of the job more, and so you shifted to doing that, and then brought someone in to do the BDR work? Like, why did you shift, and why didn't you just stay being a BDR?
I shifted because I enjoyed. It was really the system stuff. That's what I enjoyed, and that's what got me into operations. So again, in my first position, which was a company called BCA Research, that was when I got like a taste of what working with systems and what data could really do, what kind of insights you could get, and what you could roll out to your customer base. So I knew initially that I liked that. And then when I was at Reward Gateway, I had the opportunity to dig into that a little bit more. And as I said, there was really nobody running our sales force there. And then there was nobody really producing kind of insightful reporting just for the US. So there was kind of that room to move into that position.
Got it.
Yeah, I had some luck there for sure. And then during my time, kind of what solidified it all is during my time at Reward Gateway, they were kind of in an interesting position in terms of how rounds of investments work. They kind of knew when another round was coming, at least the general time frame. So I was there for that, and I got to work with, as I said, our VP of sales and our head of the US in terms of getting some reporting together to kind of tell the story of the US piece of the business, like the total addressable market and what the potential sales could be and what the pitch would be as the company got this next round of investment and moved into the next chapter. So again, I think that was like the final piece that I would say solidified my interest in operations and what this role could be, because I had the chance to kind of take this data and help tell a story with it.
Got it. And if we fast forward to today at Botify, can you quickly share like the size of the operations team and the size of the sales function that it's supporting, just roughly?
You're looking at the operations team. It's me.
Yeah. This often happens.
Yeah. So my experience has been as you said, in growing tech companies, and so Botify secured their Series B right before I joined. They secured it in February. I joined in March of this year. And then before that, I was with another Series B company called Way Up. Reward Gateway was about, I think, a little under 300. And my first position was a much more established company. But back to your question, yes, I'm the sales operations team. Right before I joined, we brought on a chief marketing officer, and she's been great building out her team. So I kind of have two, similarly focused colleagues, but more so just focused on marketing operations, I'd say. And then the sales function, we have globally about 18 account executives. So they're split between senior and junior. And then we have an SDR or BDR function. We try to keep it 1-to-1, so it's about the same, 18. And then we have obviously our account managers, customer success managers. There's about 10. And then we have a few more people who are split between kind of technical implementation or ongoing um, technical work.
Got it. And what is the current sales tech stack you guys are using?
Yeah, so there's it's split up between a few things. So we have obviously Salesforce, we have LinkedIn Sales Navigator, we have Outreach. That's mainly for our SDR function to kind of send out cadences, track their emails. It gives us activity tracking as well. We have Zoom Info to help enrich the data that we already have. We use HubSpot on the marketing side. As I said, we've recently brought on a CMO, so we've been really trying to build out that inbound function. On the customer success side, we use something called Churn Zero. I think it's been a pretty interesting tool to help implement to make sure we're tracking customer health score. And then another recent addition has been Gong. So that's been a really cool tool to help get some insights into kind of the prospect journey and ways that our account execs could deal with objections or with seeing common roadblocks. And then it's also been great to help enable our team and onboard.
Got it.
So a few things.
Nice. You seem to be tying together quite a few different applications. On that point, data quality, is that as the sales ops function, is that your job?
Yes, it's my job to action. Luckily, I have a few people throughout the company that help keep their eyes on it. But yeah, data quality in general would fall on me. There is another tool that we have, which is more like a data lake, I would say, or an application that can really take in data from a lot of different places called Caliber Mind. Are you familiar with them? I think a similar company would be like a Hull.io. So that tool has been helpful to gauge data quality, and they can. It's a very good tool to be able to kind of scan your entire CRM as well as other systems you're feeding into it.
Cool. And so that'll tell you if you're having data quality issues.
Yes, it can. And then I guess when you say data quality, I initially think of like duplicates or things like that. So we have, obviously the standard Salesforce functions turned on. I think with Botify, we also have we've rolled out an ICP scoring mechanism, and that's really what's linked to Caliber Mind. And in that specifically, there are certain signals we want to make sure are filled out that help contribute to the score. If it's really spot on the bullseye ideal customer, or if it's somewhere in the middle or on the lower end, that's based on signals that we have. So Caliber Mind helps make sure that we have those pieces either filled out or will highlight it to us when they're incomplete, something like that.
Got it. Now shifting onto your relationship with the sales reps, what are you currently doing to make them more productive?
So a few things. Again, being the dedicated sales operations resource, there's definitely a fair amount of just your day-to-day troubleshooting, making sure they're able to enter information into the CRM as they need, or get quotes out to the customers, things like that. So that's kind of the day-to-day. I think the more strategic stuff that I'm working on, and the more strategic things you would find in maybe a Series B or Series C tech company, would be growth in the tech stack. So when I think about productivity for them, for me right now, I think the best things that I've helped with has been, rolling out tools or advocating for additional resources, to help them in their day-to-day. So whether that's getting them access to Zoom Info or implementing Gong and giving them the ability to listen to prospect calls and maybe a sector that they're working on currently. And then I would add a final piece, which I'm lucky to work with a really great sales enablement manager. And then in terms of productivity, her and I have helped, have tried to work on, kind of perfecting the onboarding experience. Her more so than I, but some of the systems that we've worked on together have helped.
Got it. And do you have any tips on kind of influencing salespeople to do things?
an ongoing challenge of anyone in operations. I think when I think about sales operations, I kind of think you're the bridge between kind of the front office and back office, if that makes sense. So you have to be cognizant of the fact that you do need your sales reps to do certain things like fill out data and follow a process, but you also don't want to be kind of that traditional back office personality where you lose empathy or the ability to communicate. Yeah. So I think when I'm thinking about working with salespeople, I think about, having empathy for their role. They deal with a lot of different personalities all day. They're trying to be the engine of the company. They deal with rejection. So you definitely want to start out at least with a strategy of empathy and making sure your communication is coming from that kind of place. I think from a tactical point of view, having effective training is always good. So we have, again, at Botify, another part of our stack is a training platform. So as you roll out new process, which is common in a growing tech company, things change. You have new products. You introduce new pieces to the sales playbook. You want to make sure that you're staying on top of training, and then as you kind of troubleshoot, communicate from a place of understanding and empathy.
Got it. Yeah, I totally agree. Being the link and managing the different personalities and trying to, I really like what you said about not being the typical back office person.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to try and engage, because you can just imagine the typical like Salesforce admin or even like developer trying to interact with sales and them just like completely clashing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Can we quickly, you did mention onboarding. Do you have any tips on increasing ramp time by doing really good stuff in onboarding?
It's definitely a challenge. Onboarding is obviously a company effort. And I think at Botify, they've done a great job of working on, as salespeople or customer success people or SDRs come on, making sure they understand the culture, and then, obviously moving on to kind of that sales playbook or customer success playbook. I think the tips that I would give would be try to make sure you have kind of a scalable and consistent process as soon as you can. So for us, it is about a month-long process, and there are step-by-step actions to be taken. So obviously we touch on the culture piece. What Botify sells is a suite. It's a platform, but it's a unified suite of applications to help with technical SEO, content, and ranking. The technical SEO piece is really important to cover because our anybody client facing needs to know how to talk about that. So that's another piece of our training. So we kind of touch on culture, we touch on general sales information. You need to have products training, and then again, I'm jumping back onto Gong, but having kind of a library of calls to listen to is also really, really helpful. So again, our sales enablement manager spends time picking out and adding to a library of calls that would be helpful. So I think making sure you kind of focus on step by step and that it can scale as you bring people on.
Got it. And then I just have one more question on that. You mentioned scalability twice. How can you what have you done to make your onboarding process scalable?
Yeah, that's, I guess to just jump back one step, I guess the reason I'm always going to scalability is, again, my experience has been in growing tech companies, Series B, Series C, and it's all about scalability. You want to make sure that the process you're implementing can work for 50 employees or 50 salespeople and 100. You don't want it to break somewhere in the middle. So that's kind of been my experience and why I think in those terms. It holds true probably to anybody in operations, but I think specifically during high growth. So to answer your specific question about onboarding and making it scalable, I think what we have right now that's been working is we do legitimately actually have established playbooks, and it's, they're broken into, you could say chapters. And part of that is for us split into that technical training I was mentioning before, listening to recordings and then ending with shadowing. So I think just having those firmly established pieces and actually having a legitimate playbook has been what's helped make the onboarding process scalable. And I would, to be candid, that a lot of that was in place before I joined. I've given my feedback, and I think it's been kind of tweaked and perfected, every single day.
Got it. Moving on to forecasting, how does the sales forecasting process work, and are you kind of responsible for creating it?
I'm involved in it, and I've been responsible for, I guess, the structure of the reporting, and kind of ongoing tweaks there. What we do is we have, I guess to give a little bit of context, so we have sales reps in our Paris office, London, New York, and Seattle. So kind of that being a global company is presents its own challenges. So what we do is we pick a time every week that works across the time zones, and we have each sales lead from those offices join a call with our SVP or our head of global sales who sits in New York, who I work with on a day-to-day basis. And we have a few, specific reports that we go into. We have a few specific fields in Salesforce that kind of indicate the strength of the forecast by specific team or specific team member. And we just dive into that for about an hour.
Got it. And so are you bringing the data to that meeting for everyone to review?
I've created the dashboarding that we all look at. Our head of global sales runs the meeting. But as we discuss, if there's kind of any tweaks or anything that stands out, like, we'll dig into it kind of after the meeting and circle back from there. So I walk out of that meeting every time with a few things to dig into or resolve or find out more about.
Yep. And then in your experience in sales operations, which has been your favorite sales KPI?
Which has been my favorite? I like that question. Well, monthly bookings is a really exciting one if you're in a good place. I think so that can be very exciting too, especially in a growing company when you have goals and you hit those goals. It's a great feeling across the company. I think I would say value. I would say, instead of saying favorite, I might say ones that I would think about in terms of health and that you're moving in the right direction would probably be average sales cycle, average deal size. I think for any business that already has a robust, customer base, renewal rate is super important, especially in a SaaS business. I would probably say a combination of those three that I mentioned.
And final question, who do you know who has taught you the most about sales operations?
There's actually been a lot of people. Everywhere I've been, when I've been in an operational role, or sales operations, I've kind of been the only sales operations person. So I feel like I've learned throughout my career from people who didn't necessarily have that title, but who had, a similar thought process. To give you one caveat, I think the reason that happens, and probably happens to a lot of sales operations people, is at another company I worked at, Flashpoint, my manager was the head of finance, and we had a couple conversations about it. And he always said, like, you can't go to college or university for sales operations. So everybody kind of falls into it in a way. So, I think at each company I worked at, there was somebody that I learned something from. So at UC Research, there was a guy, his name was Dennis Metcalf. He's still there. He's now their VP of sales operations. They didn't even have a sales operations title when I was there. So I think that, shows that he already had that mindset, and then, was a great fit for that role. the company I worked at way up, there was a person named Aten Garg. He actually moved into the private sector, but he was our head of finance. I learned a ton from him. Understanding how to look at revenue from the company perspective, as well as little day-to-day things like great Excel tricks. At Flashpoint, Rob Resnick, he's their VP of finance and corporate development, also super operationally focused. I learned a ton from him. And then I think, to jump back to Reward Gateway, there were two people, Tom Lavery and Shelly Packer. They actually now have their own sales training and sales training platform called Jiminy. So they were entrepreneurial, obviously, but both had a great insight into making a business scalable and how to set up an operational framework. Obviously, to the point that they've created their own company. So I think those are the people that come to the top of my mind when I think about people that I've learned from in this space.
Yep. Awesome. Well, let me pick out what I thought was particularly valuable there. Your point, which I hadn't actually had before, about sales operations linking back office and front office, and the soft skills that you need as a sales ops person to be that link, I think is super important. Onboarding being a company effort, which I think is quite interesting. Normally it's just given to sales ops or sales enablement, and then people will just say hi to the new person, but they won't actually get engaged in onboarding. So I think that's important. And then the answer, and I agree with this as well, to a scalable onboarding process, I totally agree, is playbooks. It's documenting everything that you have and having a living, breathing playbook that gets updated and tweaked and improved as we go on. So those are the things that I particularly liked.
I'm glad to hear that.
Any final sales ops gems that you'd like to share with the audience, Rob?
Sales ops gems. Yeah, I think even touching on my last point about people who I've learned from, there isn't, at this point, a university degree for sales operations. So if you're interested in it, or you have the you think you have the mindset to dive into it, a way to succeed is to really, lean on similar people, or people that you think you can learn from in that regard. And then also, because there isn't kind of a degree system for it, there's actually a huge community that you can learn from. So, dive into things like this podcast, or dive into things like Google Groups or meetups, or online forums. There's actually, I would jump back to, this is not a part of my current tech stack, but I've used it before, which a tool called Insight Square. They have a yearly operation focused conference. So actually 1 year it was sales operations, and then they kind of grew into revenue operations, but there are great conferences out there. So I think for anybody who wants to grow in this field, those are great resources to dive into.
And there we go. Rob Smith, the Director of Sales Operations at Botify. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. If you are listening on a podcast listening application, then please subscribe, rate, and review. And if you have any questions about the show, if you know a guest, or if you have any questions about sales operations, just hit me up at tomhunt@ebster.com. That's tomhunt@ebster.com.